A retired professor stopped in the pouring rain to rescue an injured dog abandoned on the highway. Bringing the animal home rekindled a flame in his heart, dormant for months after a period of mourning. Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever in ways no one could have predicted. A story of rebirth, purpose, and compassion. Get ready, because this story will tug at your heartstrings. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment from wherever you're watching. Twilight gently descended upon the small town of Seaside. The sky, painted in hues of orange and rose, reflected in the windows of the colonial-style houses lining the main square. Eleanor sighed deeply as the taxi rattled along the cobblestone street. Each jolt seemed to awaken a slumbering memory. At 65, Eleanor was returning to the town of her birth after a 4-decade absence. Her grey hair, once a vibrant chestnut like roasted chestnuts in winter, was pulled back in a simple bun. Her hands, etched with the passage of time, clutched the strap of her worn leather purse, a constant companion since she'd left. "You can stop here, please," she requested of the driver when she spotted 73 Jacaranda Lane. The 2-story property, with its peeling light blue facade and carved wooden windows, seemed smaller than she remembered. The small front yard, once exuberant with hydrangeas and bougainvillea, was now overgrown with weeds. A tenacious vine climbed the sidewall, as if wanting to embrace this piece of history. "Will you need help with your bags, ma'am?" the taxi driver asked. "No, thank you. I only brought the essentials," Eleanor replied, paying the fare. With hesitant steps, she walked to the wrought iron gate. The familiar screech as it opened sent a shiver down her spine. As she climbed the 3 steps leading to the porch, a strange sensation washed over her, as if time had stopped in that place, patiently awaiting her return. From the pocket of her wool sweater, Eleanor pulled out an old key, tied to a faded red ribbon. She inserted it into the lock, and with a soft click the door swung open. The smell of old wood and dampness filled her nostrils, mixed with something indefinable that transported her back to her childhood, perhaps the aroma of cinnamon and cloves that her grandmother, Hope, used in her pan de muerto for the Day of the Dead. A low meow caught her attention. Sitting on the bottom step of the staircase leading to the 2nd floor, a tabby cat with orange fur and amber eyes watched her with curiosity. Eleanor blinked several times, confused. "Where did you come from?" she murmured, bending down with some difficulty to extend her hand towards the animal. The cat tilted its head, as if considering the question, and then cautiously approached, sniffing her fingers before allowing a brief caress. A thin leather collar encircled its neck, with a small metal tag that read, "Mac." Mac. That was Grandma Hope's cat's name, Eleanor whispered, feeling a chill. "Impossible that it's the same, of course." The animal purred softly as if responding, and then elegantly walked to a half-open door at the end of the hallway, her grandfather, Arthur's, old study. Pausing at the entrance, Mac looked back, as if inviting her to follow. Eleanor hesitated. That room had been forbidden to her as a child, and even as an adult she had rarely entered. It was her grandfather's private sanctuary, where he kept his books, documents, and, according to family law, secrets that should never see the light of day. "What do you want to show me?" she asked the cat, feeling a little silly talking to an animal. Mac only meowed again, more insistently this time. With a racing heart, Eleanor walked down the darkened hallway. The floorboards creaked under her feet, as if the house were awakening from a long sleep. When she pushed the study door fully open, the late afternoon light filtered through the cracks in the blinds, partially illuminating the room. The solid mahogany desk was still there, covered with a thin layer of dust. Bookshelves packed with leather-bound books occupied 2 entire walls, and in the farthest corner, something that wasn't in her memories, a carved wooden chest with gold metal details. Mac gracefully leaped onto the chest and sat down like a silent guardian. Eleanor approached slowly. The chest had no lock, only a simple latch. When her fingers touched the polished wood, she felt a tremor run through her entire body. Something inside her told her that, by opening that chest, her life would change forever. "Should I open it?" she asked aloud, though she knew the question was for herself. The sun finally set on the horizon, and the shadows lengthened across the room. In the silence of the empty house, Eleanor could swear she heard a whisper, perhaps just the wind in the cracks of the window, perhaps something more. With trembling fingers, she lifted the chest lid. The chest lid creaked open with a prolonged groan. A peculiar smell emanated from its interior. old paper, dried lavender, and something else, a fragrance Eleanor couldn't name, but that awakened a wave of nostalgia that momentarily left her breathless. Inside the chest, carefully arranged, were dozens of yellowed envelopes, black and white photographs with wavy edges, small objects wrapped in tissue paper, and a diary bound in dark brown leather with the initials HMG embossed on the cover. Hope Martinez Garcia, her grandmother. "Grandma," Eleanor murmured, as her fingers reverently touched the cover of the diary. Mac, the mysterious cat, jumped to the floor and rubbed against her legs, as if encouraging her to continue. Eleanor carefully picked up the diary and settled into her grandfather Arthur's old reading chair, which released a small cloud of dust when she sat down. As she opened the diary, a photograph slipped from between the pages. Eleanor picked it up before it fell to the floor. The image showed a young woman, perhaps a little over 20 years old, with dark hair pulled back in an elaborate bun and deep eyes that seemed to hold a complex story. She wore an elegant cinched waist dress, typical of the 1940s. Beside her, a tall man in a dark suit and serious expression had his hand lightly resting on her shoulder. On the back of the photograph, delicate handwriting stated, "Hope and Richard, 1947. Eleanor frowned. Richard? Who was Richard? Her grandmother's husband, her grandfather, was named Arthur, and this man in the photograph was definitely not him. With a racing heart, Eleanor began to read the first entry in the diary. March 20th, 1947. Today I met a man who seems to have stepped straight out of the novels I love so much. Richard Miller, recently arrived from Spain, has eyes that seem to see beyond appearances. We talked for hours at the opening party for the new library, and for the first time I felt that someone was truly listening to me. Dad doesn't approve, of course. The Millers aren't family to be mixing with, he said during dinner. But my heart no longer belongs to me. May God help me, because I know I'm walking toward the precipice with my eyes wide open. Eleanor turned the page, completely absorbed. The story that was beginning to unfold before her eyes contradicted everything she knew about her family. Her grandmother, Hope, had always been portrayed as a woman of unwavering morals, married young to Arthur Garcia, a prosperous merchant from the region. She had never heard of Richard Miller or any forbidden romance. As she continued reading, the natural light was rapidly fading. Eleanor got up to turn on the old desk lamp, surprised when it worked, casting a circle of yellowish light over the room. The following diary entries revealed an intense and secret romance between Hope and Richard, furtive meetings at the kiosk in the square, letters exchanged through a complicit friend, promises of escape to build a life far from the social conventions that separated them. June 15th, 1947. Richard proposed that we run away to Austin next week. He says he has a cousin who can help us start a new life. I'm terrified and elated at the same time. To leave everything behind. My family, my reputation, the security I've always known. But when we're together, I feel I can face any storm. I packed a small suitcase that I'll keep hidden in the back of the closet. I'll leave with only the essentials and the dreams we've built together. Eleanor felt a tear roll down her cheek. She never imagined that her sweet and demure grandmother had lived such an intense and forbidden love story. The following pages, however, brought a dramatic twist. June 22nd, 1947, all is lost. Richard didn't show up at the agreed-upon place. I waited for hours with my little suitcase, my heart pounding, alternating between hope and despair. When I finally returned home, I learned from the maid that some men had come looking for him. They say he disappeared without a trace. Dad looked at me during dinner with an expression I'll never forget, not of anger, but of grim satisfaction. The Millers always bring misfortune, was all he said. I feel that there's something terrible behind all of this, but I don't have the strength to investigate. My heart is broken. Eleanor closed the diary for a moment, trying to process the information. What had happened to Richard? Had he simply abandoned her grandmother, or had something else occurred? And how had Arthur, her grandfather, entered the story? A noise upstairs interrupted her thoughts. Footsteps. Impossible. The house should be empty. "Is anyone there?" Eleanor called out, her voice slightly trembling. Only silence answered. Mac, who had been lying at her feet, suddenly got up, his ears alert. With a fluid movement, the cat left the study and went upstairs. Eleanor hesitated. Should she follow the animal or continue her reading? Curiosity about the mysterious footsteps won. Carefully placing the diary on the armchair, she headed for the stairs. Each step seemed to protest under her weight, announcing her presence to whoever was upstairs. Reaching the second-floor hallway, she noticed a faint light emanating from her old bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. Eleanor was sure that all the windows and doors were closed when she arrived. "Hello, is anyone there?" she called again, approaching cautiously. When she pushed open the door, she found only Mac sitting on the now-open windowsill, the light of the crescent moon illuminating his orange fur. On the floor, scattered as if they had just been examined, were more old photographs, and what appeared to be a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. "How did this get here?" Eleanor murmured, bending down to pick up the objects. The first photograph showed a group of men in front of a shop. A partially visible sign read, "Garcia and Miller Mercantile." Eleanor brought the image closer to the light to examine it better. In the center were two men with their arms intertwined. One of them was undeniably Arthur Garcia, her grandfather. The other, to her surprise, was the man from the photograph with her grandmother, Richard Miller. Were they partners? She asked aloud, the confusion increasing with each new discovery. When she reached the bundle of letters, she noticed that they were all addressed to her grandmother, with Richard's name as the sender. Some had postage stamps, others did not, suggesting they were delivered personally. The most recent one was dated 1980, more than 30 years after Richard's supposed disappearance. Eleanor felt her legs give way and sat down on the edge of the old bed. What did all this mean? If Richard hadn't disappeared, what had really happened? And why had her grandmother married Arthur if she continued to receive letters from her great love? Mac jumped into her lap, purring softly. For a brief moment, Eleanor had the strange feeling that the cat knew more about this story than she did. "What secrets do you keep, my friend?" she whispered, stroking the animal's soft fur. When she looked up again, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a picture on the wall, partially covered by a dusty cloth. Getting up, Eleanor pulled the cloth, revealing a family portrait. In it, her grandmother Hope, now elderly, was sitting in a chair. Behind her, her grandfather Arthur with his hand on her shoulder, and to the right, partially in the shadows, but unmistakably present, was Richard Miller, now a middle-aged man, the three of them together, like a family. Eleanor felt the world spinning around her. What kind of arrangement was this? What secrets had her family kept for so many decades? And most importantly, why had this chest of memories been left for her to find? The answer, Eleanor suspected, was in the letters in her hands and in the pages yet unread of her grandmother's diary. Morning arrived with golden fingers of light filtering through the faded curtains of the room. Eleanor had fallen asleep on the antique bedspread, Richard's letters scattered around her like fallen autumn leaves. Mac, curled up at the foot of the bed, watched her with his amber eyes full of patience. During the night, Eleanor had read half of the letters, each one revealing more layers of a mystery that seemed to have no end. The first letter, dated January 1948, 6 months after Richard's supposed disappearance, contained shocking revelations. "My dearest Hope, I'm writing to you from Madrid, where I found temporary refuge. I know you must hate me for leaving without saying goodbye, but believe me when I say I had no choice. The night before our planned escape, your father and 2 men came to see me. They presented me with documents implicating my family in wartime dealings. Forgeries, I'm sure, but enough to destroy us. Not only me, but my parents and siblings as well. The choice given to me was clear: disappear from your life, or see my family in trouble and possibly imprisoned. Cowardly, I chose to leave. Your father assured me you would never know the truth, that you would believe I simply abandoned you. Perhaps it's better this way. Hate is easier to bear than pity. I don't know if this letter will reach you. I entrusted it to Mary, your friend who always supported us. If you are reading these words, know that my heart remains in Seaside, though my body is an ocean away. Eternally yours." Richard. Eleanor wiped away the tears that welled up in her eyes as she recalled the contents of the letter. She slowly got up, feeling each of her 65 years in her stiff joints. She needed coffee. She went downstairs to the kitchen, where, surprisingly, she found some basic supplies in the pantry: coffee, sugar, a still-sealed package of Maria cookies. While the water boiled on the antique stove, which miraculously still worked, Eleanor wondered who had prepared the house for her arrival. Someone certainly knew she was coming. With a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, Eleanor returned to the study downstairs, where she had left the diary. Mac was already there, sitting on the open chest, as if guarding its secrets. You never told me who takes care of you, Eleanor commented, scratching the cat's head, which closed its eyes in appreciation. Picking up the diary, Eleanor continued where she had left off. The following entries showed a Hope devastated by Richard's disappearance. Pressured by her family to accept the courtship of Arthur Thompson, the son of one of the region's most influential families. November 10th, 1947. Today, I accepted Arthur's marriage proposal. Dad was ecstatic. Mom cried with joy. No one seems to notice that I'm dying inside. Arthur is kind and respectable. They say that in time, I'll learn to love him. I don't have the strength to fight anymore. Richard is gone, and with him, all my dreams of a different life. The next entry, however, was dated February 1948, almost 3 months later. February 15th, 1948. A miracle happened today. Mary came to visit me, and when we were alone, she handed me a letter. From Richard. He didn't abandon me as I thought. It was my father who drove him away with threats. I cried until I had no tears left. Arthur and I will be married in 2 weeks. It's too late to change the course of things, but knowing that Richard loved me, that he still loves me, gives me the strength to face whatever comes. I answered immediately, and Mary promises to get the letter to Madrid. Eleanor took a sip of coffee, absorbing the revelation. Her grandmother had married Arthur, even knowing that Richard had been forced to leave. But why? The following pages might contain the answer. The diary entries became more spaced out after the marriage. Hope described her life as Arthur's wife, a comfortable existence but without passion. She mentioned occasional letters exchanged with Richard, always through the faithful friend Mary. Then in October 1948, a surprising entry. October 12th, 1948. Something extraordinary happened yesterday. Arthur called me for a private conversation in his study. I thought that perhaps he had discovered the letters, that my secret had been revealed. Instead, he offered me a cup of tea, sat down in front of me and said with surprising calm, "I know about Richard." I almost fainted from the shock. Arthur continued, explaining that he and Richard had been friends in their youth, before the families became estranged over business matters. He said he always knew about the love between us, and that in fact it was he who helped Richard escape to Spain when my father threatened his family. "I married you to protect you, Hope," he said, "and to give Richard time to resolve the legal issues your father created against his family. I can't describe the confusion I feel." Arthur looked at me with such kindness without a drop of resentment. "I don't ask for your love," he said, "only your friendship and discretion. What we have is an arrangement that benefits everyone for now." Eleanor dropped the diary into her lap, stunned. Her grandfather knew about Richard all this time. More than that, he had helped in the plan to protect him. What kind of man would do that? Certainly not the stern and traditional grandfather she knew in her childhood. The sound of knocking at the front door interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor looked at the clock on the wall, 8:30 a.m. Who could it be at that hour, in a house that was supposedly abandoned? With a racing heart, Eleanor went to the door. Through the side window, she saw an elderly woman, perhaps a few years older than her, with perfectly coiffed white hair and an elegant posture. "Eleanor? Eleanor Thompson?" the woman called. "I'm Olivia Miller. I think we have a lot to talk about." Miller. The surname hit Eleanor like a bolt of lightning. Could it be possible that this woman had some connection to Richard? With trembling fingers, Eleanor opened the door, feeling that she was about to discover another crucial piece of this family puzzle. "How did you know I'd be here?" Eleanor asked without yet inviting the woman in. Olivia smiled, a smile that seemed to carry decades of secrets. "The cat," she replied simply. "Mac always knows when a Thompson returns to the house, and he always lets me know." As if summoned by his name, the orange cat appeared in the hallway behind Eleanor, his amber eyes fixed on the unexpected visitor. "They say every story has 3 sides," Olivia commented, as she settled into the living room armchair. "Your side, my side, and the truth that lies somewhere in between." Eleanor watched the visitor with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. Olivia Miller seemed perfectly at ease in the house, as if she knew it intimately. Mac had jumped into her lap as soon as she sat down, receiving caresses with evident familiarity. "You know this cat," Eleanor stated, serving the tea she had prepared in delicate porcelain cups she found in the kitchen cupboard. "I've known Mac for a long time," Olivia replied with an enigmatic smile, "as well as the Mac that came before him, and the one before that. The cats in this house have always been called Mac since 1950. Eleanor frowned. That would be 75 years. Impossible. I'm not saying it's the same cat, dear, Olivia laughed softly. It's a tradition. When one Mac leaves, another appears, always with the same orange markings. Richard believed it was the same spirit returning to protect the secrets of the house. Richard, Eleanor murmured. You knew him. He was my uncle, Olivia revealed, her eyes darkening with memories. My father's younger brother, Edward Miller. When Richard was forced to flee to Spain, it was my father who initially sheltered him, and it was in our house in Madrid that he received the first letters from your grandmother. Eleanor felt a lump in her throat. Finally, someone who could fill in the gaps in the story she had discovered. I found my grandmother's diary, Eleanor said, and Richard's letters. I know there was an arrangement between my grandfather Arthur, my grandmother Hope, and Richard, but I don't understand how it worked, or why my family kept everything a secret. Olivia took a sip of tea, as if organizing her thoughts. You need to understand the context of the time, she began. In the late 1940s, the Thompsons and the Millers were rival families in Seaside. Your great-grandfather August Thompson accused my grandfather Manuel Miller of cheating him in a land deal. The truth is that August manipulated documents to take properties that rightfully belonged to the Millers. How do you know that? Eleanor questioned. Because years later, Arthur found the original documents in his father's safe and understood the truth. Olivia placed her cup on the coffee table. Arthur was different from the rest of the Thompson family. He had a strong sense of justice. When he discovered what his father had done, he sought out Richard, who was already working in the local commerce, to offer a silent reparation. Eleanor remembered the photograph she had found, the two men in front of a shop with the sign Garcia and Miller Mercantile. They became partners, she concluded. Yes, and close friends, despite the rivalry between the families. It was Arthur who introduced Richard to your grandmother Hope at an event at the town library, knowing both of their interest in literature. What he didn't expect was that the two would fall so deeply in love. Olivia paused, her gaze lost in memories. When August discovered the romance between his daughter and a Miller, he flew into a rage. He threatened to discredit not only Richard, but his entire family, using his influence with local authorities. That's when Arthur proposed an extraordinary plan. Eleanor leaned forward, absorbing every word. Richard would temporarily leave for Spain, where he would be safe. Arthur would marry Hope to protect her from her father's wrath and to legitimize any child that might come. Remember, Hope might already have been pregnant at that time, and when the waters calmed down, they would find a way for everyone to live their lives with some measure of happiness. Eleanor felt her heart racing. Are you saying that my grandfather married my grandmother knowing that she loved another man? Why? What did he gain from that? Olivia smiled sadly. Arthur loved Richard, Eleanor. The revelation left Eleanor momentarily speechless. Loved like a brother? She finally asked, though she already suspected the answer. No, dear. Arthur loved Richard in the same way that Hope loved him, in a time when such love was not only socially unacceptable, but also criminalized. The arrangement protected everyone. Hope from her tyrannical father, Richard from persecution, and Arthur from suspicions about his orientation. Eleanor got up, walking to the window. The small town seemed so peaceful out there, so normal, while inside this house ancient truths exploded like time bombs. And Richard, did he stay in Spain forever? No, Olivia replied. He returned 3 years later, when August fell ill and lost his influence. Richard opened a bookstore across town and discreetly resumed his partnership with Arthur. To the outside world, they were just old friends and business partners. And for my grandmother, what was Richard to her? Her true love, whom she saw secretly. With the complete approval and often in the presence of Arthur, Eleanor sat down again, stunned by the revelations. That's why my mother, she began, with a new understanding dawning. Carmen was Hope and Richard's daughter, Olivia confirmed softly. Although legally she was recognized as Arthur's daughter, the three of them raised her together in this very house until she turned 18 and went to study in Austin. There she met your father and married shortly thereafter. Did my mother know about this arrangement? Your mother learned the truth when she turned 15. It was a difficult revelation, as you can imagine. She initially rebelled, feeling betrayed and confused. It was part of what led her to leave Seaside. The teacup had grown cold in Eleanor's hands as she processed Olivia's revelations. The grandfather clock in the corner of the room struck 10 o'clock with a sound that seemed to reverberate in the silence that had settled between them. So, my whole life, Eleanor began, her voice barely a whisper. Everything I thought I knew about my family was an elaborate facade. Olivia shook her head gently. Not a facade, dear. An arrangement born of love. A very unconventional one, certainly, but genuine. Arthur adored your mother, as if she were his own daughter, and in every way that matters, she was. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? Why wait until now? Your mother wanted to protect you. Society then, even now in many ways, isn't understanding of family arrangements that defy conventions. Also, after the initial confrontation when she learned the truth, Carmen decided it was better to maintain appearances. I think she feared your reaction, especially when you were young. Eleanor got up again, walking toward the family portrait she had brought from upstairs. She placed it on the coffee table. This portrait, when was it taken? In 1980, for your grandmother Hope's 70th birthday. It was a special day. The three of them, Hope, Arthur, and Richard, had found a way to live in harmony for more than 30 years. Your mother even came from the capital with your father and you. You were 20 then. I remember that day, Eleanor murmured, the memories slowly emerging. But I don't remember this man, Richard, at the party. He remained discreet during the public celebration. The portrait was taken privately after the guests had left. Only the closest family was present. Max stretched lazily in Olivia's lap before jumping to the floor and walking toward the hallway, as if following a familiar route. The cat seems to have its own agenda, Eleanor commented. Mac has always been the guardian of this house and its secrets, Olivia smiled. Come, there's something else you should see. They followed the cat to the study, where Mac had again settled on the open chest. Olivia pulled out a large envelope, sealed with red wax, from the bottom of the container. On the front, written in elegant calligraphy, was Eleanor's name. This was left for you, Olivia said, handing her the envelope. By Hope, Richard, and Arthur, to be delivered when you return to this house. How did they know I would return? Arthur always said that the Thompsons eventually returned to their roots. Perhaps he sensed it, or perhaps he simply hoped that someday you would want to know the truth. With trembling fingers, Eleanor broke the seal. Inside were several handwritten pages, the last of which was dated just days before the death of her grandfather Arthur, the last of the three to pass away. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading these lines, you have returned to your grandparents' house and discovered our most precious secret. First, I must ask your forgiveness for not having told you the truth during my lifetime. Some truths are difficult to share face to face, even when they come from the purest love. The story you have discovered within these walls is one of courage, sacrifice, and a love that transcended the conventions of our time. Your grandmother Hope was an extraordinary woman who had the courage to love against all social expectations. Richard was a man of unwavering principles whose loyalty never faltered despite the trials he faced. And I, Arthur, your legal though not biological grandfather, found a happiness I never thought possible within our unusual arrangement. I loved Richard from the first moment, with an intensity that frightened me. In a time when such love was unthinkable, I found a way to keep him in my life while offering protection to Hope, whom I loved like a sister. The three of us built something beautiful together, a family based not on social conventions or obligations, but on authentic love and complete acceptance. Your mother, Carmen, was the greatest blessing of this union. Although I know it was difficult for her to understand and accept our situation, the house now belongs to you, Eleanor, along with everything it contains. We also leave you the bookstore, The Dream Nook, that Richard founded, and that Hope and I helped maintain. It continues to operate under the management of Olivia, who has been our confidant and support for many years. My greatest wish is that you find peace with our story, and that perhaps you can see the beauty in our unconventional family. We didn't live by the rules of others, but we lived with love, respect, and honesty among ourselves. With all my affection, Arthur Thompson, P.S. Take care of Mac. Like all his predecessors, he has a special ability to know who needs comfort. Eleanor dropped the letter onto her lap, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Olivia extended a comforting hand toward her. It's a lot to take in, I know. It's not just that, Eleanor said, wiping away her tears. It's, for my entire adult life, I've felt like a stranger in my own skin. I never fit into traditional molds, never felt I truly belonged anywhere. Now I understand why. What do you mean? Perhaps I inherited more from my grandparents than I ever imagined, Eleanor smiled through her tears. Their courage to live on their own terms, their ability to love beyond conventions. My whole life I've been searching for something, without knowing what it was. Maybe I was looking for this, the truth about who we really are. Mac meowed softly, as if in agreement, and jumped into her lap. The bell chimed softly as Eleanor pushed open the carved wooden door. The Dream Nook was exactly as its name suggested. A cozy space filled with old and new books, with comfortable armchairs scattered among bookshelves that reached the ceiling. The aroma of paper, leather, and freshly brewed coffee enveloped the place like a warm embrace. Olivia had insisted on bringing her here, explaining that the bookstore was a fundamental part of the family history. Richard built this place as a sanctuary, she had said as they walked along the cobblestone streets of Seaside, not only for books, but for people who, like him, sought a space to be themselves without judgment. An older man with silver hair and thick-rimmed glasses looked up from behind the counter, where he was organizing what appeared to be invoices. His eyes widened at the sight of Eleanor, and an expression of surprise and recognition crossed his face. "Good heavens," he murmured, taking off his glasses. "You're the spitting image of Carmen." Olivia smiled. "Sebastian, I'd like you to meet Eleanor Thompson, the granddaughter of Richard, Hope, and Arthur. Eleanor, this is Sebastian Ortega, the bookstore's longest-serving employee, and one of the few who knew the true nature of the relationship between your grandparents." Sebastian went around the counter and, after a moment of hesitation, embraced Eleanor tightly. "I've been waiting for this day for a long time," he said in an excited voice. "Richard always said you'd come back someday." "Did you know Richard well?" Eleanor asked when they separated. "I was his assistant for over 30 years, Sebastian smiled. "But more than that, I was his friend, the only one outside the family circle who knew the complete truth." While Sebastian made coffee in a small kitchen at the back of the bookstore, Eleanor walked around the space, running her fingers along the spines of carefully preserved antique books. In a special section, protected by a glass case, were first editions of classics of Latin American literature: Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Borges, Rulfo, Paz. Richard was a passionate collector, Olivia explained, watching her. "Every book in that display case has a special story. Many were acquired during his trips with Arthur. They took business trips together twice a year. It was their way of having time alone. And my grandmother? Didn't she mind? On the contrary, Hope encouraged them to go. She understood better than anyone the nature of the love they shared. Besides, those trips also meant that Richard would bring new treasures for the bookstore, which she helped manage. Sebastian returned with a tray of coffee and pastries, placing it on a round table surrounded by 3 plush armchairs. "This was their corner," he said, pointing to the armchairs. "Every afternoon after closing the bookstore to the public, your grandparents would meet here to discuss books, events of the day, or simply to be together. I would watch them from the counter, marveling at how 3 such different people had found such perfect harmony." Eleanor sat down in one of the armchairs, feeling an immediate connection with those who had occupied it before. Sebastian handed her a steaming cup of coffee and continued. This place was more than a bookstore. It was a refuge for people who, in one way or another, lived on the fringes of social conventions. Rebellious students, misunderstood artists, lovers society didn't accept. Everyone found a safe space here. Your grandparents created a small community based on acceptance and mutual respect. "And nobody suspected their arrangement?" Eleanor asked. "Oh, there were rumors, of course," Olivia replied, taking a seat opposite her. "There always are in small towns. But Arthur's respectable position as a successful merchant, the discretion of everyone involved, and frankly, the inability of many to conceive of an arrangement like theirs, protected them from major scandals. Besides," Sebastian added with a knowing smile, "Richard had a special gift for winning everyone over. From the parish priest to the mayor, nobody wanted to believe anything bad about the charismatic bookseller who organized poetry readings for children on Sundays and donated books to the local school." While sipping her coffee, Eleanor noticed a framed photograph on the wall behind the counter. It showed a group of people in front of the newly opened bookstore, as suggested by a ceremonial ribbon being cut. In the center were Richard, Hope, and Arthur, flanked by what appeared to be important citizens of the town. "The grand opening in 1951, Sebastian explained, following her gaze. "A triumphant moment for Richard. This bookstore represented his definitive return to Seaside, his refusal to be driven away by threats or prejudice." "There's something else you should see," Olivia said, getting up. "Something that very few people know about." She guided Eleanor to the back of the bookstore, to what appeared to be an ordinary wall of books. With a practiced movement, Olivia pressed a hidden mechanism, and a section of the bookshelf silently slid away, revealing a small room. "Richard's Sanctum Sanctorum," Sebastian announced reverently. Eleanor entered what appeared to be a private study. A mahogany desk dominated the space, covered with meticulously organized papers. The walls were lined with more books, family photographs, and what appeared to be framed manuscripts. Richard was more than a bookseller, Olivia explained. Under the pseudonym Michael Starr, he wrote some of the most influential works on personal freedom and unbound love published in Latin America during the 60s and 70s. Eleanor approached one of the framed manuscripts, reading the title with surprise. "Love Beyond Names." "I know this book," she exclaimed. "I read it in college. It was revolutionary for me. It changed my perspective on human relationships. And it was written based on the lived experience of your grandparents." Sebastian smiled. Richard channeled his unusual situation into literature that helped many find their own way. Eleanor sank into the desk chair, overwhelmed. How many more layers does this story have? How many more secrets are there to discover? "Many," Olivia replied. "And now they belong to you. The house, the bookstore, the manuscripts, the diaries, the entire history of your family is in your hands. The question is, what will you do with it?" Before Eleanor could answer, the bell at the entrance rang, announcing a customer. Sebastian excused himself and went out to attend to them, leaving the two women in the secret study. "Why now?" Eleanor asked. "Why reveal all this to me right now?" Olivia looked at her intently. "Because there's one last promise to fulfill. One last wish of your grandparents that only you can carry out." The afternoon light slanted through the bookstore windows as Eleanor finally processed Olivia's words. Richard's private study, with its newly revealed secrets, seemed to hold the very breath of family history. "What do you mean by one last promise?" she asked, studying the old woman's face. Olivia approached a small safe hidden behind a painting on the wall. With precise movements, she dialed the combination and withdrew a yellowed envelope and a small object wrapped in blue velvet. "Your grandparents left specific instructions," she explained, handing her both objects. "This envelope contains the shared last will and testament of Richard, Hope, and Arthur. And this," she pointed to the wrapped object, "is the key to fulfilling it." With trembling fingers, Eleanor unwrapped the velvet, revealing an antique bronze key with an intricate design of intertwined flowers on the handle. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It was their personal symbol," Olivia explained. "The intertwined flowers, jasmine for Hope, oak for Arthur, and olive for Richard, a symbol of their interwoven lives." Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document and a handwritten letter. The document, written in formal language, established the creation of a foundation called Three Paths to support young artists, writers, and individuals whose personal circumstances placed them outside of prevailing social conventions. The letter, written by Richard, explained in more detail, "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, you've discovered not only our secret, but also the literary work born from our unusual shared life. What you may not yet know is that, over the decades, we've been silently building a support network for people like us. Souls who live on the margins, lovers society doesn't understand, artists whose vision defies conventional expectations. The Three Paths Foundation already exists on paper, waiting only for your approval to officially come to life. With the resources we've accumulated throughout our lives, Arthur's properties, my royalties as an author, Hope's investments, we've secured its financial viability. Our last wish is that you, having learned our complete story, decide if you want to be the first director of this foundation. We understand that this would mean exposing aspects of our lives that we always kept private, and we'll understand if you prefer to keep our secrets buried. The key accompanying this letter opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, where we've deposited all the necessary documents along with a final manuscript, our joint memoirs, written during the last years of our lives. The decision is yours, dear granddaughter. Whatever your choice, know that you'll have our love and understanding, transcending the time and distance that separate us. With all my soul, Richard, and in spirit, Hope, and Arthur." Eleanor let the letter rest on her lap as tears blurred her vision. It was too much. Not only discovering the true nature of her family, but also facing this unexpected responsibility. "Did you know about this?" she asked Olivia. "I'm one of the executors." The old woman nodded. Along with Sebastian and a lawyer in Austin, we've been waiting for your return to proceed. And if I'd never come back. Richard always knew you would, Olivia smiled. He said that all the Thompsons, or in your case, all the Millers disguised as Thompsons, eventually feel the call of their roots. But at making their story public, wouldn't that be a betrayal of their privacy? They saw things differently. They believed that their story, shared at the right time, could help others find the courage to live authentically. Society has changed, Eleanor. What was unthinkable in their time is now increasingly accepted. Sebastian returned to the study after attending to the customer. Sorry for the interruption, he said, noticing the letter in Eleanor's hands. I see you already know about the final project. Did you know too? I've been involved from the beginning, the man smiled. This bookstore has been more than a business. It's been an underground hub for people who needed understanding and acceptance. The foundation would only formalize what we've been doing discreetly for decades. Eleanor got up and walked to the window, looking at the town square bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Families strolled peacefully. Elderly couples shared benches under the trees. Young people laughed in lively groups. My whole life I felt like I didn't fit into traditional molds, she finally said. My failed marriage, my erratic career, my complicated relationships. I always felt like an outsider, even in my own skin. Now I understand why. She turned to Olivia and Sebastian, a new determination shining in her eyes. I think it's time for my family's story to come to light. Not as a scandal or a curiosity, but as what it truly was. A story of brave and extraordinary love that transcended the conventions of its time. Sebastian smiled broadly. Richard would be so proud of you. There's something else, Olivia added. The manuscript in the safety deposit box, their joint memoirs. Richard always said that if you decided to move forward with the foundation, you should be the first to read them completely. Eleanor looked at the key in her hand, feeling its weight. Not just the physical weight, but the symbolic one. I'll go to the bank tomorrow, she decided. And then we'll begin the work of honoring their legacy. As they left the bookstore, the sun was beginning to set over Seaside. The church bells chimed in the distance, calling to evening mass. To Eleanor's surprise, Mac was patiently waiting on the sidewalk in front of the door. How did he get here? She asked in amazement. Sebastian and Olivia exchanged amused glances. We told you, Olivia smiled. The cats in this family have their own means and their own purposes. Mac has always been where he's needed. As they walked together along the cobblestone streets toward the family home, Eleanor felt a strange sense of peace settling within her. For the first time in her adult life, she felt she was exactly where she should be, doing exactly what she should be doing. Morning dawned clear and bright over Seaside. Eleanor woke up early after a surprisingly restful night's sleep. Mac, who had chosen to sleep at the foot of her bed, watched her with his amber eyes, as if assessing her mood. Good morning to you too, she smiled, stretching. It's a big day, isn't it? The cat responded with a meow that sounded almost like an affirmation. After a light breakfast, coffee and pastries that Sebastian had left the night before, Eleanor dressed carefully. Something in her felt that this day deserved a certain formality, as if she were about to participate in an important ceremony. She chose a cobalt blue dress she had packed almost as an afterthought. The bronze key tucked into her jacket pocket seemed to radiate a strange warmth against her hip as she walked toward First National Bank, located on one of the main streets of the historic downtown area. The bank manager, a middle-aged man with a perpetually serious expression, changed completely upon hearing Eleanor's name and seeing the key. Miss Thompson, we've been expecting you, he said, with a respect that surprised her. Please follow me. He led her through silent hallways to a private room where the most important safety deposit boxes were kept. With ceremonial movements, he inserted his own key into one lock, indicating for Eleanor to use hers in the other. I'll leave you alone, he said enigmatically before withdrawing. Disconcerted by the plural, Eleanor turned the key and opened the heavy vault door. Inside, instead of the safety deposit box she expected, she found a small private study. The walls were covered with family photographs, many she had never seen, and in the center was a desk with a manuscript bound in reddish leather. But the most surprising thing was the person sitting behind the desk, an elderly woman in her 80s, with white hair pulled back in an elegant bun and dark eyes that were incredibly familiar. Mom, Eleanor whispered, feeling the world stop around her. Carmen Thompson, whom Eleanor hadn't seen in almost 10 years since she moved to Spain after a heated argument, smiled with a mixture of nervousness and hope. "My girl," she said simply, getting up with some difficulty. Eleanor crossed the room in 3 strides and enveloped her mother in a hug that contained years of distance, misunderstandings, and unexpressed love. "How? Why?" she stammered when they finally separated. "Olivia contacted me," Carmen explained, indicating for her to sit in the chair opposite the desk. "She told me you'd returned to the family home, that you'd discovered the chest of memories. Did you know I was coming?" "Not for certain, but when you sold your apartment in Guadalajara 3 months ago, something told me you were finally ready to return to your roots. You were always like Dad, like Richard, needing to get away to find your way back." Eleanor looked at her mother, noticing details she had never perceived before. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, identical to the photographs of Richard, the curve of her chin, a perfect echo of Hope's. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" she finally asked. "About our family arrangement." Carmen sighed deeply. "Fear, I suppose. When I discovered the truth at 15, I reacted badly. I felt that my whole life had been a lie. I rebelled, I ran away to Austin. I refused to talk to them for months. But you eventually came back." "Yes," Carmen smiled, "because despite how unconventional it was, our family was full of authentic love. My 3 parents, because that's how I considered them all, taught me that true love transcends labels and social expectations. When I married your father, I had already made peace with our history. So why keep it a secret from me?" "Your father insisted," Carmen said with a hint of sadness. "He loved my parents, but he feared that society wouldn't understand, that it would affect you at school if other children found out. And then, it became increasingly difficult to find the right moment." Eleanor nodded, understanding. After her father passed away when she was 12, her relationship with Carmen had become complicated. 2 strong women with different views on how to live, constantly clashing. "And when you married Edward," Carmen continued, "a marriage doomed from the start," Eleanor interrupted with a sad smile. "I tried to fit into a traditional life that was never for me." "Exactly," Carmen nodded. "I saw so much of myself in you. The confusion, the feeling of not fitting in. But I also knew that, like me, you needed to find your own way." Carmen placed a hand on the bound manuscript. "This is what you came to find. The complete memoirs of Richard, Hope, and Arthur. The story of our family, written from 3 different perspectives and interwoven into a single narrative. Have you read it?" "Only the first part. They wanted you to read it completely first, to decide what to do with our story." "The 3 Paths Foundation," Eleanor murmured. "Yes. Their last project, their final legacy, but it's up to you whether or not to move forward. What do you think?" Carmen settled into her chair before answering, her eyes reflecting decades of reflection. "I think it's time for our story to come to light," she finally said. "For too long, people like our parents have lived in the shadows, building beautiful but hidden lives for fear of social judgment. Things have changed, Eleanor. The world is more ready now to understand that love has many forms." Eleanor stroked the cover of the manuscript, feeling under her fingers the interwoven lives of her grandparents. "What happened after our last argument?" she asked, changing the subject. "You left for Spain and we've barely spoken since then." Carmen smiled sadly. "Ironic, isn't it? I ended up in the same country where Richard found refuge so many years ago. It wasn't planned, but perhaps there's a certain poetry in it. I've been living in Barcelona, teaching literature at a small academy, and thinking a lot about you, about our family, about everything I left unsaid. And now you're here. And now I'm here." Carmen nodded. "Because some stories need to be completed. Some circles need to be closed." Eleanor opened the manuscript, reading the first line. "Every great story begins with an act of courage or madness. Ours began with both." "That's Richard's handwriting," she commented. "Yes, although you'll find passages written by Hope and Arthur. They worked on these memoirs for years, alternating chapters, sharing perspectives. It's an extraordinary document." Eleanor closed the manuscript and looked her mother directly in the eyes. "I'm going to do it," she declared. "I'm going to establish the foundation, publish their memoirs, tell their story. But I need your help, Mom. I can't do it alone." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "Are you asking me to stay?" "I'm asking us to be a family again. To complete what they started." Carmen extended her hand across the desk, and Eleanor took it, feeling as if a circuit long interrupted was reconnecting. "There's a lot to rebuild between us," Carmen said softly. "We have time," Eleanor replied, "and we have their example to guide us." 6 months later, the old house on Jacaranda Lane buzzed with activity. What were once dusty and silent rooms had now been transformed into vibrant spaces. A meeting room, a small archive, offices for the newly established Three Paths Foundation. The manuscript of the three grandparents, carefully edited by Eleanor and Carmen, had been published under the title Three Paths, One Destiny, a story of unconventional love. To everyone's surprise, except perhaps Olivia and Sebastian, the book had been received with enthusiasm not only in Texas, but throughout the United States, generating conversations about the diverse models of family and love that existed outside of social conventions. The bookstore, the Dream Nook, had become the unofficial headquarters of the foundation, hosting readings, workshops, and meetings for young artists and individuals seeking safe spaces to express themselves. In the backyard of the family home, where the bougainvillea had bloomed again under Eleanor's care, a small celebration was taking place. It was the official launch of the foundation's first art scholarship, named in honor of Richard, Hope, and Arthur. Carmen, with a glass of white wine in her hand, watched her daughter move among the guests with natural confidence, explaining the foundation's mission, sharing anecdotes about her grandparents that could now be told openly. Olivia approached Carmen, leaning slightly on her cane. "They did it," the old woman commented with satisfaction. "They'd be so proud." "Of Eleanor, certainly," Carmen smiled. "She was always the strongest of us, though it took her time to discover it." In a quiet corner of the garden, under a flowering orange tree, Eleanor sat for a moment to rest. Mac appeared as if by magic, jumping into her lap with the familiarity of someone who knows perfectly his place in the world. "There you are," she murmured, stroking his orange fur. "You always show up at the important moments." The cat purred, fixing his amber eyes on hers with an almost human intensity. From her position, Eleanor could see the entire scene. Her mother chatting animatedly with Olivia, Sebastian explaining the history of the bookstore to a group of young writers, the new friends and allies they had found since they decided to make the family history public. The chest of memories she had discovered that first day had been only the beginning. Every day since then had brought new discoveries, new connections, new understandings about herself and her place in this extraordinary family constellation. She remembered a phrase from her grandmother Hope's diary that she had included in the book. "True love cannot be contained within the forms that society deems acceptable. Like water, it finds its own way, creating new channels when the established ones prove too narrow." Eleanor smiled to herself, feeling a profound peace. She had finally found her own channel, her own path. And the most beautiful thing was that this path had led her exactly where she needed to be, back to her roots, but with a new understanding of who she was and where she came from. The circle was complete. Mac stretched in her lap and yawned as if signifying the end of his mission. In the twilight, Eleanor could swear that for a moment his eyes shone with an almost human understanding, as if he were the guardian of all the secrets this place had sheltered. And perhaps, Eleanor thought, as she rejoined the celebration with the cat faithfully following in her steps, in some extraordinary way he was. My friends, we've reached the end of the story. Did you enjoy it? What lesson can you take from this story? Leave it here in the comments. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and watch this video that's playing on your screen. This story will impact you. Until next time. 2.